She went under the wheels.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And we have a very exciting second episode in our reborn Under the Wheel series thing that uses all the same assets as the original, clearly. Today we're going to be talking about Joker, the incredibly controversial movie that has the whole world set on fire and is on its way to make $1 billion. Controversial
Wait,
Joker.
like actually $1 billion?
Well, I think it topped out at 70 million last I checked yesterday, which is not bad. It's pretty good, but that's close enough, right? We round up, you know?
Wait, you said you rounded up from 70 million to $1 billion?
I'm sorry, 700 million.
Oh, okay.
700 million. No, it's been this movie that costs somewhere between 55 and 70 million. Yeah, is going to make upwards of. It'll probably top out around 85 or 850 million or 900 million, probably. Like a pretty good art.
Warner Brothers execs can hire a lot of hookers with that money.
That's a lot more nothing but lettuce diet for Joaquin Phoenix in the future. Before we get into Joker talk, because actually the creation of the movie is almost as interesting as the movie itself, or depending on who you ask, is more interesting than the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that, what have you been watching this week?
Well, I managed to see Parasite, which was excellent. It's only playing in like one theater anywhere remotely close to where I live.
Yeah, it's not playing anywhere close to where I live.
Yeah, it's not surprising. There's not a huge market for South Korean movies in the U.S.
Right.
But it's really good. Anyone who has the opportunity to see it should. And then if you've seen Snowpiercer, you kind of know what you're in for, at least in terms of like how Bong Joon-ho constantly juggles tone across the movies. Like, it'll start off kind of boring, and then it's like a lighthearted comedy, then it's a dark comedy, then it's a horror movie, and then it's back to a comedy again, and then it's like a thriller, and then it's a depressing drama. I feel like all of his movies have that arc.
I mean, there's something to be said for someone who's consistent in their style, but that's a whole lot of movie for what I'm guessing it's right around 90 minutes to 2 hours. That's a whole lot of movie.
It's 2 hours.
Okay, that's a whole lot of mood swings.
It works. It works really well, and I think it's an interesting kind of balancing act, because if you watch a movie that's just depressing the whole way through, yeah, it's pretty depressing. But if you watch a movie that's funny for the entire time you've seen it, and then suddenly becomes depressing, then it's even more depressing.
The Pixar philosophy, for every laugh you have to have a cry, but in this case it's for every 10 laughs make sure you have one really depressing, powerful moment. Kind
of, yeah. Like have you seen The Host?
I have not.
Okay. I won't spoil it then.
I don't delve into Korean extreme cinema too often. Every now and then.
His movies are not extreme though. They're not like some of those other guys like Park Chan-wook,
right,
who did Old Boy. But like The Host it's a monster movie that's fairly comedic through broad portions, and then becomes like apocalyptic, and then becomes comedic again. But then every time it gets a little too funny, like someone likable dies horribly.
We're having too good of a time. No. It's really hard to balance those kind of emotional, like those kinds of tone swings. Mm-hmm. I have an appreciation for people who really just completely go for it. Like they're very pendulum-esque on it. Like, the funnier it is, the more punishing the next movement's going to be, the next tone change is going to be. So for someone to be able to balance that out is really effective.
Yeah, I mean, Bong Joon-ho's a total madman, but in the best way.
In the best way possible, yeah.
Yes.
Has he ever made, like, I always find an interesting test is to say, like, one of our film professors was like, oh, this person has never made a bad movie. Like, I always find that an interesting test of, has this person ever made a bad movie? And so I haven't seen in fact, I've only seen Snowpiercer, which I really liked, but it'd be really interesting to see something else of his, watch his whole category or his whole catalog, just to kind of get an idea if he does have a bad movie in there. So interesting. Parasite. It's on my list, but again, it's hard to find until it gets on VOD.
Yeah.
Did he also do Oakjaw?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I have yet to watch. That's another one. It's in my queue. It's there. It's there, but I'll prioritize that to watch. Let's see. I rewatched some old movies. I was rewatching No Country for Old Men. That's basically just and of course, I think we've had this conversation a bunch of times, but like, I was reading up about it because of how minimal everything is in the movie, and I'm a big fan of minimalism in movies, but also just the cutting and editing pattern of the Coen brothers. There's something about No Country for Old Men that you can go cut by cut and see where they're making their edits, or when they make scene transitions, how they decide to make their scene transitions. That is just a very educational process. I did the same thing with The Departed, and I learned a lot about editing from that. I also learned how many cuts are in between each sequence, and how Scorsese somewhat collapses space by having two, like if he's in a shot reverse shot, when he returns back to the original shot, if the other person is doing something dramatically different, he'll pause on it for a little while and then go into the next action to make sure you know that some time has passed while they're having this conversation. So it's specifically when Jack Nicholson's having that conversation with Leonardo DiCaprio about him going back to school and like going to college and everything. They have like this one really strange cut where it's on Jack Nicholson and they're talking normally. When it cuts back to Leonardo DiCaprio, he's blowing smoke rings in the air. And that's always been like that's always stood out as like a very strange cut. But it also makes me feel like time has elapsed since they had finished their conversation. So that's kind of what I was watching, and watching No Country for Old Men to see how they layer all of their scenes together in that. And then also just trying to work my way through Peaky Blinders season 5 still. So
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get to the crux of what we were going to talk about today. You saw Joker how long ago?
A week ago.
Okay. I saw Joker yesterday. And so I have some notes on it. You have some stuff you want to talk about. But overall, let's just start with our ratings for it.
I mean, I'd say it's a witness, definitely.
Yeah, I would say it's a solid witness. And not just for Joaquin Phoenix's performance, which is obviously the reason you're going to go see this movie, is for Joaquin Phoenix's performance. And he's great in it. But I think like a lot of things that I thought, like, for example, Todd Phillips as a hack, I was like, you know what? I got to give him some credit for this, because it's at least, to me, it was at least a competently made movie.
Yeah, it was, which is nice.
Yes, it's always nice.
We don't always get that.
No, especially
anymore.
in heavy performance-based movies where, Joaquin Phoenix took control, but there were a couple of choices that Todd Phillips made that I really like, and there's a couple of choices that he made that I didn't like. And so, like, just to give you, the main choice that I liked was that the movie never strays from Arthur Fleck. Like, it's always in his perspective the entire movie. So he's in every
except for
scene.
like one little shot at the end.
Right. Oh,
The alleyway.
Oh, God. Do you think that was a Warner Brothers, like, that was, they were like, hey, you have to have this in there? Because that thing almost ruined it for me. That one small sequence.
Well, the movie really comes up short the most when it tries to connect itself to Batman in any way, because all of those connections are just kind of distracting from the main story, and they don't work that well. They feel out of place, and they call way too much attention to themselves. So it's like I like the take on Thomas Wayne being
an asshole.
Just this arrogant, out of touch asshole. I like that, reinterpretation of his character, but everything else about it is just so weird. Like the Bruce Wayne cameo, the Alfred cameo, the alleyway bit at the end.
I would say they get progressively worse as the movie goes on. They have the Fantastic Four effect. The Batman references get worse as it goes on. I agree with you on Thomas Wayne. I actually liked seeing Bruce Wayne there because he slides down the pole, and that was my favorite bit of fan service.
See, that, well, you know me, I hate fan service
of
any kind for any reason. So that pissed me off.
Oh, I loved that.
Down the pole. I'm like, oh, fuck you.
I loved it. It was just, I felt it was just subtle enough. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to shoot the wife and rip her pearls off as she's falling awkwardly. That happens at the end of the movie. But that's what I mean. Like, it progressively gets worse. I agree. The whole movie could work without the overt references to Batman, the Thomas Wayne, the scene. But it does. But I do like that scene where he confronts Thomas Wayne in the in the theater of
In the bathroom?
Yeah, in the bathroom. I like that scene a lot, and it makes sense that the mom. Spoilers all around. It makes sense.
Yeah, spoiler alert from here on. You've seen the movie by now. It's
Hopefully.
made $1 billion.
Yeah, hopefully you. It's made $70 million. So hopefully you've seen the movie by now. But the more overt the Batman references got, the less I think they worked.
Yeah, I mean, killing Thomas and Martha Wayne at the end of the movie is just so gratingly annoying.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be there at all, and
No.
it's a weird aside. Like it's like the entire movie, like you said, has been locked on Arthur's perspective, and then for 1 second it deviates into this weird bit of fan service, and that kind of shit is really off-putting. It's kind of like an Interstellar, where they're scientifically accurate through like 90% of the movie, and then the last 10% you just go into straight nonsense.
We're fourth dimensional beings.
Like, yeah, you got if you establish the rules for your movie, you have to play by those rules for the rest of the movie. You can't just break them suddenly and dramatically once and then go back like nothing happened.
I think with the Interstellar thing, with the science thing, it's more, I don't have as much issue with that, because it's like, okay, well, we're being as scientifically accurate as we possibly can be. We're going to take a slight jump here for about what feels like 30 minutes. It's only like 10 minutes, but it feels like 30 minutes. And then we'll return back to as much scientific reality as we can.
Well, we can get more into Interstellar later
at a different
on,
day.
Because I think we need to talk about Ad Astra as well.
Yes, yeah, we do.
So, but we can get into that after we talk about Joker.
Yeah, that's fine with me. But as far as like the Thomas Wayne scene in Joker, you're right. It does break the rules that you've established in your movie. I agree that generally speaking, I hate it when it does that. Also, the Thomas Wayne, Martha Wayne scene, not only was it unnecessary for the movie, but it was carried out incredibly poorly. It was just the way it happens just felt awkward at best. Like,
yeah.
That's why I'm wondering if it's a case of studio interference where they're like, hey, look, you've gone this far. Let's show Martha and Thomas Wayne dying. The only reason I say that is because they could have just had Martha and Thomas Wayne go down the alley, have that person dressed in the mask go down the alley, and then cut out the whole killing of them, and we would already know what's going on. So I think he missteps. He missteps there.
Well, I mean, as much as I'd like to talk shit on Todd Phillips because he did Hangover 2, Hangover 3.
Old School, Road Trip, Starsky and Hutch.
I mean, yeah, he's not... He does a pretty good job
War Dogs.
with most of the movie. He's pretty inconsistent, but...
He's consistently
he makes some really good... He's consistently inconsistent, but he does make some really good choices. Like, the train sequence is
awesome.
Excellent.
Yes.
Like, it's amazing. He does a really good job directing that. Joaquin Phoenix does the heavy lifting for the movie. He carries the entire movie on his back. Everyone else is kind of just along for the ride, including the writer and director, or writer-director.
Co-writer-director, yeah.
Everything good about this movie is related to Joaquin Phoenix in some way, if not just entirely him.
Right.
But yeah, the train sequence, I mean, from a directorial standpoint, is great. I love the way they cut out the lights as they're passing through the tunnel to build all that, to add all that extra drama and crank the intensity to 110%. I like the way that the Joker, like Arthur, goes from kind of being justified in his actions to being just sadistic.
Oh, by the end when he just like straight up murders the last guy after shooting him in the butt?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like that transition and how it's handled. I like everything leading up to that, like when he's in the children's hospital, like dancing and singing, and like he's genuinely having a good time. Like the kids are having fun, like everything's going well for him, and then the gun falls out of his pocket. Yeah. And he like just tries to hide it, and then like some of the kids think it's funny. Like I really like that. I love that little moment. And again, I really like the way it's directed. I like the way it's shot a lot as well. The Arkham Asylum bit where Joaquin Phoenix is crying on the staircase and reading over his mom's psych eval, that got me a little choked up, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Like that was, but I mean, that's mostly on the strength of Phoenix's performance.
Right. Well,
I would say more than anything, because the writing in that scene is not great by any means. It's just Joaquin Phoenix is so captivating. And I would say that, the entire movie, everything that's good and bad about it probably can get summed up with the talk show scene at the end, but I'll let you get your thoughts on.
Well, we'll talking about directing choices, and one of the best directing choices they made was that Todd Phillips always wanted Joaquin Phoenix for the role. even though the studio was trying to push Leonardo DiCaprio. And so Todd, yeah, I know.
Leonardo DiCaprio, you cannot act. I'm
would
sick and tired of people pretending he's this great actor.
He would put on a performance. That would be that's for sure. It would be a performance.
He would perform.
But
yes.
But the smartest thing Todd Phillips did was just let Joaquin Phoenix do his own thing. I think in some ways, possibly to the detriment of the movie, in the sense of there are things that I have questions about performance-wise that Joaquin Phoenix chose to do that I think, I don't, you know what, it doesn't really hinder the movie. It's just like questions that I have. Like when he started dancing, I kind of formulated that it's usually in a point where he's, oh God, I had this yesterday.
I think the dancing is meant to represent like his feeling of being completely free and 100% himself.
Right. I would agree with that.
And that doesn't feel like a Joaquin Phoenix choice either.
Yeah, but he would do it, and it seemed like he would do it so often in the movie.
Yeah, but the very overt, like quote unquote artsy dancing sequences, like in the bathroom after he kills those guys, or like when he's dancing down the stairs, it feels like Todd Phillips had this idea that he thought was really brilliant and symbolic and artistic and whatever. When it just comes off kind of weird.
Yeah,
and he's like Joaquin, I want you to dance, all right? I want you to dance.
Dance.
And then Joaquin's like, sure, and then just made it up. And Todd Phillips was filming. He's like, yeah, this is great. This is great. I'm a genius.
Give me more. This is gonna get me an Academy Award. That's gonna be the biggest irony is if he wins Academy Award for Best Director for this movie. I will probably laugh myself so hard.
Well, everyone knows the Academy Awards are a joke anyway. So if they want to give it to him, they can. It'll be a stupid decision, but they can do it.
Yeah,
they've made plenty of other stupid decisions.
That's true. And we haven't even seen the latter half of like this. I feel like this came out a bit too early for us to be like, yeah, it's gonna win an Academy Award for Best Director. But if it gets a late December push somehow, because this is the Christmas movie of the year, I would not be amazed if it won Best Director, because they're like, oh yeah, you let Joaquin Phoenix really embrace his inner character. I'm like, yeah, like he did in The Master and You Were Never Really Here, and to a lesser extent even in Inherent Vice and any number of films. But
yeah, I mean, The Master not sweeping the Oscars is a real tragedy.
Is the real crime of the century.
That's the real crime of the century.
What was I going to say? The one major misstep I think they made as a writing team in the movie was giving Arthur Fleck a name. I've seen plenty of movies where the main character doesn't have a name, to know that it's really not that hard to...
I think it's just to reference The Killing Joke.
Is that what his character's name was in The Killing Joke?
I think it's Arthur Fleck in The Killing Joke, yeah.
Okay. I was also this is going to come controversial, but... making him mentally insane from the get-go, I thought was not really the right way to go, because then it's like an easy pass of like, oh, well, he was always crazy.
Yeah, well, so here's what I'll say on that issue, because I think the weakest parts of the movie are its writing and its just general conception. Like, it's a series of kind of bad ideas executed well, is the Joker movie.
I can get behind you on that, but go ahead, but elaborate on what you mean.
But this movie, it's about mental illness because our current cultural conversation focuses on mental illness a lot. This movie has no idea what mental illness is or how it works. It has no idea what crazy people are actually like, because Arthur does not come off as mentally ill most of the time. He's got a neurological disorder from being whacked in the head too many times, which causes him to laugh uncontrollably, but that's not a mental illness.
With the hands.
That's not a mental illness. That is a neurological, physical problem. His brain got hit really hard. Secondly, he obviously has a very active fantasy life, but they never portray him as being schizophrenic. Like, his whole relationship with the Zazie Beetz character, which is so poorly executed, it should have been cut from the movie. Like, it is one of the worst, like, half-assed subplots I've ever seen. Like I said, this movie's very uneven. It's got some great stuff. That is terrible.
Even all the way to the last moment, the big reveal, which was spoiled for me. So
but the big reveal's not even a reveal. It's so poorly done in the first place. She never speaks. She's barely around. They don't build it up at all. She's just kind of hanging out in the background at various times.
Right.
So when you find out that she's not real, it's like, who gives a fuck? She said 3 words the entire movie. So he obviously has a rich fantasy life, but he's He's not, schizophrenic or hallucinating or anything. And then he's like, he never shows any real mental illness type symptoms other than depression. He seems like a very sad, developmentally disabled person. You know what I mean? He's like he's a really autistic, or maybe he's got the brain of a child and he's really sad, and that's it.
Does autism not count as mental illness?
No, that's a developmental disability.
Okay.
Mental illness would be depression, bipolar. Mental illness is more psychological and emotional, whereas like autism is more neurological.
Fair enough.
But that's what it seems like.
Ahead.
It comes off as like he has, they always talk about mental illness. Sure, he may have mental illness in that he's depressed, but, depressed people don't go around murdering folks because they're usually too depressed to get out of bed. Yeah, he seems like a man with very severe autism, which is also weird because the Joker is like traditionally this very cold, calculating, charismatic, intelligent character. And in this, we have like a dumb, childlike, socially inept, intellectually stunted man.
Right.
Is the Joker.
Yeah.
So he's the polar opposite of the traditional Joker that appears in almost every other, media.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And the one thing I think that they nailed was how he just like does things in a chaotic, half organized way, but it always kind of seems to work out for him.
Yeah,
Feel that
like that bit.
I like that.
But,
like at the end of the movie, when he goes on his when he goes on the stage in order to kill himself, and he ends up killing everyone else there. I actually really like that scene. But again, if it's influenced by the Killing Joke, I like the idea that the Joker is some average Joe who just had a really bad day and it snapped. Like something in him just snapped. That's the way that I think it should have gone. And then by adding in the whole mental instability, but not building up to the mental instability, like he's already 3 steps away from it at any point in the movie. By not building into that, I think it kind of cuts it short. And also, like you said, doesn't make him, unfortunately, the definitive version of the Joker.
Yeah.
I've panned really hard on this. I used to really like Jack Nicholson's interpretation of the Joker, but I've definitely gone to the Heath Ledger Joker in recent times of being like,
I mean, Mark Hamill is the best Joker.
The Mark Hamill, Paul
that's not
Dini
debatable.
Joker is the best Joker.
Yes. But I guess, my biggest problem with the movie, from a script and story standpoint, it doesn't seem to know what it's doing. Like, the Joker's motivations, Arthur Fleck's motivations, are really muddled. They're very unclear. Like he said, it's like he's a child with poor impulse control. He just kind of reacts chaotically to things that happen. Sometimes things don't bother him that much. Sometimes things bother him so much he whips out a gun and kills somebody. And maybe that kind of mental randomness maybe that's intentional. Maybe it's maybe they want it to be that way, where his actions don't totally make sense. But they could have done a better job of selling that if that was what they were going for. And then secondly, from like a messaging perspective, I mean, the movie is really annoying in that it thinks it's really important and it's very serious and it has a message about society and shit.
Okay, that's where you and I are going to differ on this point.
It seems to want to push that it's a serious movie with serious things to say, but then it doesn't have anything to say. Like it raises all these questions that it never really answers, or never really even tries to answer. If it does answer them, it trips over its own words so much that what it has to say doesn't make any sense. Because they mishandle the central character and his internal psychology so badly.
I disagree with you that the movie so I do feel like the movie takes itself I feel like the movie almost takes itself way too seriously. I think most of the feeling of the movie is in the score, because the score of the movie takes itself really seriously. But then you have things like Joker literally shoots someone in the butt, and then he's like he's like running around on different subway trains chasing this guy who's got like a gaping bullet wound coming out of his ass. Like that's goofy. Arthur Fleck running into the window, that's goofy. They have all of these moments where it's like this could tilt into being absurd comedy at any point in it, but you have this really,
it could, but it doesn't.
But you have this really like dramatic score of like really long cello notes, making sure that it's depressing. So we talked about tonal consistency. I think the movie tries to take itself really, really dour and really, really serious. But there was no point in the movie where I thought they were trying to make a comment on the society we live in. It just felt more like it was a movie. Because if we're supposed to...
I don't think they are trying... They may not be trying to comment. It almost seems like they're trying to appear like they're commenting on society without actually commenting.
And I didn't even get the fact that they were trying to appear like it. Like, I guess maybe my bar was so low for the movie that it just felt like a comic movie. You know how they sometimes talk about people who use elements of the media as like background in order to, for lack of a better word, tell their story, quote unquote. I felt like this was the case here because you have the garbage strike that is a thing. I don't really know why it had to be a garbage strike. They don't really comment about how, I guess they comment a little bit about how like, oh, the filth of this city, but it just felt like something that was happening in the movie. They have the mental issues of the Joker and the mental society of like, oh, well, how am I supposed to get my pills now? Whereas, you know, the social workers doing the, you know,
well, I mean, Todd Phillips literally called this movie a cautionary tale in an interview. Like, that was his log line.
Oh, did he? It felt like, it just felt like...
He said it's a cautionary tale.
That's hilarious.
Which is one of the worst ways to pitch a movie ever, because every time I hear cautionary tale, I think of like some don't do drugs PSA. Like, you know, the one, you know, like those commercials where like the teenage girl smokes weed and then like deflates into like this weird deflated balloon on her couch?
Yeah.
Do you remember those? That's what I think of when someone says cautionary tale, or like the egg where it's like, this is your brain.
This is your brain on drugs.
This is your brain on drugs, and it's a fried egg. Like, I just think of shit like that when someone says, it's a cautionary tale, which, I mean, you know, Todd Phillips, go figure. Yeah. But...
It's just funny because...
But yeah, I think this movie is intended to have a point.
Well, if that's the case, then they failed because I couldn't tell what the point was. Like, that's the simple fact of the matter. I just thought it was a really comic book, kind of like how Logan took the tropes of, and actually that's one of the only reasons this movie could have been made was because of Logan, but how Logan took like the Western tropes and put it into a comic book movie. It's like they wanted to take the texture of a 70s movie and put it in a comic book movie, but not really comment on it in any sort of, like you said, they put half measure ideas out there in order to kind of keep the story moving. But if they're using that as a justification as to why this guy mentally snaps, they do a poor job of implementation. Because if the idea that he snaps because there was one final straw that broke the camel's back, that's fine. But you've already stacked the deck against this guy. And I guess that might be the point, but it also doesn't make sense how this guy who is like, he has dark thoughts, how he can, I don't know. I guess you're right, because I think about it, I'm like, well, but then, you know, he kills 3 yuppies and all of a sudden the whole world is like, yeah, the clown is the king. And it's like, it made it fun for a movie, but I don't...
It's also weird that like he says all I have are negative thoughts, but then when you actually see into his mind,
they're all positive.
His fantasies are very positive. Like, they're all fantasies of like being loved and having a family and being accepted. So it's like, you never see any dark thoughts that he has.
No, not at all.
He just says all I have are negative thoughts, which is like, again, that's lazy writing. It's like, we just have to take the script at its word. And I guess I want to get into the talk show scene because I think that is a microcosm of the entire movie, where it's like Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that scene is amazing. The directing and the editing and even the score and how like over the top it is works really well.
Yeah.
Robert De Niro's really good in it. Like, everything they do to sell that scene works, and I was on the edge of my seat. But if you break it down in terms of like the dialogue that's being said and how the beats of that scene move along, it's so hacky because it's literally just Joaquin Phoenix and Robert De Niro going back and forth saying out loud what the themes of the movie are. And it gets so bad that the final quote-unquote joke is Arthur Fleck just says what the movie's about. He says, what do you get when you take a mentally ill loner who's been rejected by, like, in a society that treats him like trash and blah, 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 and you get exactly what you deserve. Bang. Like, you just said what the entire movie's about. The audience has to do no work now. You've literally told them what they're supposed to believe. Like, this is no longer, you're veering away from art and into the world of propaganda at that point, where you're just saying, like, think this is what you're supposed to to think. Think what I tell you. And I hate that. It's so bad. And it ruins what is such an amazing scene otherwise.
That didn't ruin it for me because I didn't stress that point too much, but I agree. You're right. Like, although I do sometimes like it when, because they have the award-winning trailer and it's like subtly talking about the themes of the movie as we awkwardly work in the movie title. Like that's that moment right there. It's like, I agree with you. I don't really.
The meaning
have
of a
problem.
movie should be self-evident, and it should be there for the audience to grasp and figure out on their own. The moment you tell it to them, you are propagandizing now, or you're advertising now.
Yeah, but it's done in so many movies.
Well, that's because a lot of movies are lazy. I think.
Well, and I would agree that this movie is kind of lazy in some regards.
Yeah, it is. At least in this respect.
That's true. Because I mean, it doesn't completely ruin the scene for me because it's already getting to that point. Like when they're having their dialogue between the two of them, it quickly goes from Arthur is crazy to Arthur has this like uncanny, highly researched sociological outlook on the way society has treated the poor and the mentally unstable in a heartbeat, in this way that he's not able to either speak about or verbalize in the rest of the movie. And so if I have any fault with it, it's how he goes from insulated, mentally unstable, unconfident, to a quick switch to boom, he's the most confident person in the world as soon as he murders his mom. I think is the moment where like it switches gears like that. But in that dialogue with Robert De Niro, where he's stating explicitly the idea of rich not taking care of poor uprise and revolt, like that.
Well, he literally just says, "We live in a society, gamers rise up." Like
we live in a society. Exactly.
The other thing that's interesting about this movie is, I mean, I kind of want to get into the larger cultural conversation about it because it is really bizarre.
It is.
Because, you know, on its surface, the movie seems to be doing two things at the same time. Like, broadly, it's just sort of, we live in a society where things are pretty bad and we deserve it because we treat each other poorly. I think the idea is, you know, it's not just like the wealthy waspy elites are trampling on the poor, they're trampling on minorities, they're trampling on women, because this movie does make all those claims, but it's also like everyone is doing that. We're all Thomas Wayne to one degree or another. It's weird because, you know, a lot of the people who are the most hurt by the system in the movie are, you know, the poor. They make a huge point of putting black people on screen.
Yeah.
And putting them in positions where they're kind of getting abused or chewed up by the system. They put women are constantly under assault from, like, that woman is being sexually harassed and is in danger of being raped by those drunk Wall Street guys. Arthur Fleck's mom was beaten and abused by her boyfriend and apparently by Thomas Wayne. So it puts all that stuff out there. And then at the same time, the hero is the type of person who would take those "we live in a society, gamers rise up" memes that are intentionally cringy and are there to make fun of people who think like that. He's the kind of person who would take them seriously. And it's this really bizarre, like, cognitive dissonance going on within the movie where you have these two sort of groups claiming victimhood, and it's granted to both of them.
Right, which is why everyone is saying it's like, oh, this is why we have to be afraid of the incel culture thing, because they can take a little bit of a gag and take it all the way and go become organized and destroy everything, but also as a sort of like, oh, this is why we need more, not to get too far into the political talk here, but more social policies that that give more money to the poor, and we shouldn't cut funding for the poor and healthcare and things like that. But that's why I feel like it just doesn't work. If your message is that confusing, it just seems like you used all of these things as background to help create a world that feels alive and have a character interact in this world and be assaulted by it. But it doesn't really comment on it, and like you said before, it doesn't really make a stance as to like, well, this is the solution we should make. It's not. This is where
it takes a very politician approach.
It takes a really
sort
middle
of talking
ground.
about both sides of its mouth.
And this is where, I mean, a lot of people talk about how this is like a Scorsese film, and I guess I see it. I guess I can see the influence of it. But like, this is where Scorsese takes it the extra mile, and he's incredibly critical on his characters. The movie doesn't necessarily seem critical of Arthur becoming the Joker. It doesn't, it almost paints it as like, oh, it's good. He's embraced his manifest destiny. Whereas like Scorsese would be incredibly critical of this complete psychopath. Like there would be a way that he could distance himself from it.
But that's the thing. It's like Arthur Fleck isn't even portrayed as a psychopath. He's portrayed as like a...
Well, at the end, he's borderline psychopath.
Borderline, yeah. But it's like for most of the movie, he's like a disgruntled postal worker, you know?
Yeah.
And it's weird too, because I think if you take away everything that it sort of half says or tries to say and fails and look at what it says successfully, I think it's really just a plea for like compassion. It's, you know, it's just telling people like, listen to the people around you, treat each other with kindness. If you see someone with a problem or who looks like they're having a rough time, like reach out, try to make the world a better place instead of just only looking after yourself.
Yeah.
But I think everyone's getting distracted by that because it seems like, and you said you didn't want to get political, but
go ahead.
I will for you. I mean, it seems like you have the, you know, like social justice bloggers on one side and alt-righty people on the other side who both, they're engaged in like an arms race to see who can have the cringiest, most cinematically illiterate, least sophisticated, most ignorant take on the movie. And they're constantly one-upping each other in that respect. Because I think on the left, people are just focusing on, you know, incels, toxic masculinity, this movie's dangerous, quote unquote, even though it's really tame.
Right.
Every movie made in the 70s is more dangerous than this. And, you know, they're picking apart flaws that aren't there. And then by that same token, you got a lot of alt-right type folks who are embracing the movie as like they've been seen, you know. Todd Phillips is on their side. He's supporting them, which is, again, like they're like Arthur Fleck. They're so out of touch. They're so incapable of reading other people and understanding other people that they're taking a meme and thinking it's real. They're taking a joke and thinking it's a fact. They're taking a movie that's got a lot of... It's a real mixed bag and thinking it's propaganda to support them. And it drives me insane because no one can have a real conversation about this movie anymore.
Well, it's hard to have a conversation about it when it doesn't really like say anything. I don't know. I just feel like it's such a... It's like I said before, this feels like the movie that takes elements of what's going on in society either during its time or when it's supposed to be taking place if it's a period piece, and just using that as a means to tell their story without any real... Specifically with this movie, without any real consideration as to the social or societal effect that it's commenting on. Like, I don't think, who was it? Someone was like, movies don't cause people to commit crimes. I don't think that this will have an effect where someone's like, yeah, you know, Arthur Fleck got on to a talk show and blew the guy's brains out. I'm going to do that too. Like, no, unless you're incredibly humiliated in the way that he is. Which, to be fair, this is something I wrote down. I thought he was going to be even more humiliated in the movie. It's bad, but the movie kind of had kid gloves on when it came to outright humiliating him. And I think if he didn't have a history of mental issues, then you could have made it even more humiliating, and it could have been even harder to watch. Like,
yeah,
Todd
it
Phillips
could have
kind of
been,
went
but I think it's
half
like
the way there.
But yeah, it's true. I mean, he comes off as a developmentally disabled guy, so it's like you don't want to pick on him too much, otherwise they'll come off as being in bad taste. And at the same time, I think from a marketing perspective, yeah, you can't win. You can't win. From a marketing perspective, you can't.
As soon as you give him a mental instability in that way, like at that point, you can't win. I think if you kind of hid your hand a little bit more, kind of like how in I hate to compare it, but like in You Were Never Really Here, how it's like, okay, well, clearly Joaquin Phoenix's character has some issues.
Yeah, well,
but you
that
hide your
movie
hand.
does a really good job of portraying a mental illness because he's got severe PTSD.
Right.
And that PTSD is built into the structure of the editing of the film.
Right. But see,
like
You Were Never Really
every
Here's
traumatic
such a
event.
fantastic movie.
It is, and every traumatic event that he goes through the course of the movie is hidden or obscured because he's repressing it, and that's genius. Having a guy who seems, again, not mentally ill but developmentally disabled, and then trying to construe that as something else, the fact that he's very childlike, it doesn't work. And that's the other thing too. It's like, again, throughout the entire movie, Joker comes off as a child.
Yes.
He doesn't understand how the world works. He has no emotional maturity, no impulse control. And so it's like when people I understand like sympathizing with him because he is portrayed somewhat sympathetically, and you do feel for him because he goes through a lot of bad shit, but it's like people who hold him up as some sort of model or like as some kind of hero to aspire to be, it makes no sense because it's like, this is, he's got the brain of a 12-year-old.
That was my other major problem, was that, see, you put it better than I did. You said childlike. That's a good way to put it, which is something Joaquin Phoenix is really good with, because if you look at Gladiator, it was kind of a similar thing with his character in that filmography and amazing movies that he's been in. Because I think one thing that I tend to forget, because I've seen him in so many roles where he's had to like physically alter himself, is that he's good at playing those roles where he's kind of creepy and not exactly like a pretty boy role, but he's also had a handful of pretty boy roles throughout his career.
He has. He definitely has.
But the childlike thing, again, I guess it
messes up the movie.
It does. It really does.
It's such a weird choice.
But again, my main fault is that they went too far away from the Killing Joke. It's like, if you make him a normal guy, an average guy, but if you make him a normal guy, why cast Joaquin Phoenix in the role?
Yeah, well, I wonder if almost this is some kind of fourth dimensional chess on behalf of Todd Phillips, where he's actively, again, it's like that "we live in a society" meme. He's actively making fun of anyone who would take this movie seriously.
I hope so. Because again,
like,
Joker literally
he's holding
shoots
up
a guy
Arthur
in the
Fleck
ass.
He's like holding up Arthur Fleck and saying like, if you take this movie seriously, you're just as stupid as this guy. Which, if he intended that, it didn't come through,
No.
but I applaud the idea at the very least.
It's a B+ for effort. Again, it's a witness because of him. I also, about halfway through the movie, I stopped thinking this, but I was wondering how much of this movie was reflective of Todd Phillips' career. Like that one.
In what way? Oh, you like in the fact that he includes a reference to Due Date?
No, what was the reference to Due Date?
And when Arthur Fleck is rehearsing for his appearance on Marty's talk show, he's watching it in the background, and Robert De Niro announces, "Please welcome, famous actor Ethan Chase." Ethan Chase is the name of Zach Galifianakis' character in Due Date.
Oh my god. Oh, that's...
It's weird because that one joke in Due Date always seems to pop up for me somehow. Because like the whole thing is his real name is Ethan Chase, but he changes it to Ethan Tremblay because he wants to be an actor and he thinks that sounds more actor-y.
That's right.
But the joke is Ethan Chase sounds
more accurate.
And then there's that kid Jacob Tremblay who was in like Room. So every time I see his name, I think of Due Date now.
You're like, he should really change his last name to Chase.
Yeah, Jacob Chase.
Yeah, either that or Zach Galifianakis was right the whole time.
That's the thing though. That's kind of the weird real life punchline, is that I can't think of a single actor whose last name is Chase, but there is a very, well-to-do child actor whose last name is Tremblay.
Yeah, or if you told me Chalamet would be a good last name for an actor, I'd be like, no.
Let's not get into that.
We can because he's in Interstellar, but I don't know. I feel like it's a movie that there's a lot. So going back to the Todd Phillips' career thing, like Arthur Fleck is good or decent at being a clown, but then he gets bashed over the head by the critics, and like he feels distanced and isolated and from doing the thing that he thinks or wishes that he's good at, but a lot of people say his movies are shit. Things like that, like little notes here and there, like kind of how Chef was very loosely influenced by Jon Favreau's career. Like I'm wondering if there's a little bit of like metaphorical to Todd Phillips' career, including things of like,
I don't know,
because especially when he came out and said like, I decided to go away from comedy because it's too hard to do comedy in our society today because everyone's too sensitive. Like that played into my thoughts too.
I think from a sales perspective, I think this movie does the tried and true trick of, you put out something that is intentionally controversial or framed as controversial, step back and let everyone, cough up their money to see it and then give their take on it.
Which is funny because Warner Brothers did not want to greenlight this movie.
They didn't, yeah. I mean, we can get into the kind of some of the making of it in a minute, but it's like, it's a very simple, trick. It's like Howard Stern's entire career was based on it. Amy Schumer's entire career, if you watch any of her god awful stand up, it's her saying something like edgy and then going, did I just say that? Oh, I'm bad.
Oh my God, woman saying poop, the controversy.
Yeah, it's so fucking stupid. Like, ugh. She's the worst. But it's like that. It's just like, Todd Phillips is like, I said something. I made a movie I wasn't supposed to make. I'm a bad boy. And then everyone, is like, oh my God, this is so dangerous and controversial. Let's all go pay $15 to watch it. And it's brilliant because people fall into his lap. And, I mean, hey, I bought a ticket, so I took the bait.
Yeah. Well, I would actually say that this is more like, how you have the directors who switch gears suddenly to do something different for reasons you can't fathom. Like when the Zucker brother did Ghost, and then Last Night after doing, the Naked Gun movies, or when Peter Farrelly made Green Book. Yeah, and he actually made a documentary before he made Green Book. He went out and made a documentary after Dumb and Dumber 2. It's like these career pivots to be controversial, or like when an actor chooses a role that's completely the opposite of what they're known for, just to sort of
like when Adam Sandler shows up in a prestige drama from time to time.
Yeah, but it would be different if it was like a one-off, which as soon as Uncut Gems trailer came out, it's like, oh, clearly Adam Sandler does want to be...
I saw the trailer for Uncut Gems. It looks great.
It does. It looks really... let me put it this way. It looks really interesting. Mm-hmm. It looks a lot like the movie The Gambler.
Yes.
But without the whole...
Wait,
Go ahead.
And I was going to say, I want to get into some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, because you forwarded that interesting article about, Warner Brothers and Jared Leto and all that.
Yeah. So the most interesting thing I heard was that Todd Phillips had been thinking about doing a Joker movie, and then there was a rumor out there that he wanted Joaquin Phoenix, and that the studio was in negotiations with Joaquin Phoenix to do the role, and people were like, oh no, he wouldn't want to do something like that. He doesn't want to do that movie. And then I read an interview with Joaquin Phoenix where he's like, wait, what? And the guy's like, yeah, there's rumors that you're in talks to do a Joker movie, or that there's a Joker movie and they're circling you. What are your thoughts on that? And he's like, dude, that sounds awesome. And then not even a month later, Phoenix. It's greenlit. So he's like, whereas I think other actors might want to stay away from the role, how they have all of those stories of oh no, this is just pop culture nonsense. No one really this is I've definitely declined it. He's like, oh no, that sounds great. I would love to do that.
Well, Joaquin Phoenix is the best American actor alive right now. I mean, he's right up there with Tom Hardy and Daniel Day-Lewis in terms of best actors in the world.
Right.
And he's definitely number one in the States just because Philip Seymour Hoffman is gone.
Oh.
Rest in peace. Yeah. If he was still around, him and Phoenix would be 1 and 2, which is probably why The Master is so amazing, because it's the two best American actors in the world going head to head. But yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is awesome.
He is.
So yeah, I'm not surprised he was totally into the role. And it's also interesting that this is his first movie after You Were Never Really Here, where he gained a ton of muscle.
Yeah.
To play that character, and then lost it all and then some to play Arthur Fleck.
He's probably crazier than Christian Bale. On every single dimension.
He watched his own brother die.
Did he? I don't know.
He watched his brother die.
I don't know anything
And he grew up in a cult.
Became a rapper for a year just for a documentary.
Well, but that was just pretended to become a rapper for a year.
Just for a documentary. He spent a year of his life. A mockumentary. But so he was all in on that, and then for some reason, especially if you read that article about Jared Leto as the Joker, it seems like, wow, WB really burned him on that. Except Jared Leto put, quote unquote, all of this work, unquote, into a Joker character that is just the worst ever.
Oh, it's the worst. Everyone agrees too, it's amazing that everyone can agree,
including
from all walks of life,
the director of the movie.
If even David Ayer hated
so much of his performance out of it that only 10 minutes remain. Like, it's astounding.
I just love that all Americans and all people around the world are united in our belief that
Jared Leto's
the worst Joker. He's a terrible Joker.
Can I just like posit Jared Leto's a terrible actor in general, and he should just stop getting work? Can I posit that?
I watched American Psycho recently, and he's not bad in that. Although it is satisfying to see him get killed.
Okay, correction. Jared Leto is a horrible leading man. He should be relegated to special guest spots. Not even guest starring roles, not even supporting roles. Special guest spots.
Because that's a good point, because all of the movies where I've seen him and he's not just distractingly bad are movies where he's in it very briefly and usually gets beat up or killed at some point. Like in Thin Red Line, in American Psycho, in Fight Club. Like he's in there for like a little bit and then he's gone. And it's great. Whereas like Blade Runner 2049, he's terrible. And not only is he terrible, he's distractingly terrible.
Yeah. It's campy bad, but to a degree that he shouldn't be campy bad. And there's all of these choices in his character that are weird. So, long story short, Warner Brothers did the smart thing. They jettisoned making a solo Joker movie with Jared Leto, who freaked out his cast members, created a, albeit memorable in all the bad ways, version of Joker, who was not funny in the least.
Or interesting or threatening.
Yeah. And whose part was cut. And then apparently the farther down you read about how he created a lot of controversy with the agency that is responsible for getting him hired on movies. He hated his time there and consciously worked against them. Why would you want someone like that
to work
on it?
Wasn't it like he was with CAA? CAA also represents Todd Phillips, and he was trying to pressure CAA to crush Todd Phillips' movie.
The movie down. That's correct.
Yeah.
To which it's like, okay.
And then he went to WME afterwards.
He did, but they said that his relationship with CAA was already on the rocks.
It's not surprising.
He had gone through 4 agents in like a handful of years, which is insane. Yeah. He just had to keep switching agents because guess what? No one wants to deal with a guy who's sending rats to his attractive co-star that he's supposed to be in love with.
He created a hostile work environment, which, I mean, I guess David Ayer already creates hostile work environments because he wants to like fist fight every actor at least once or something.
I mean, if you look at the behind the scenes of Fury, like I can't believe people stayed on in that movie.
Yeah.
Just, hey, we're all gonna live in a truck for a month, like, or in a tank for a month.
Tank for a month.
Like, why to build bonding? I'm like, no, that sounds horrible.
Well, didn't Shia LaBeouf say that like helped him get sober or something?
Oh my God, did it? I know he.
Yeah.
I know he like.
He said like Fury saved his life.
God, he's so bad. But I hate him so much in Fury. I can't take Shia LaBeouf as a tough guy. I don't care how hard his people try to push that narrative. I can't take him as a tough guy.
I haven't seen Fury, but David Ayer is crazy enough as it is. You don't need Jared Leto adding on to that. And then again, what's really telling is if David Ayer, who is by all reports a maniac, thought Jared Leto was taking it too far, that's really saying something.
You have the problem. So jettisoning Jared Leto is a great idea. Just like jettisoning David Ayer from Suicide Squad 2 is a good idea. God,
I mean, David Ayer calling you crazy is like Kanye saying you have a big ego.
Yeah, that's pretty true. And then apparently Scorsese was tied as a producer to this movie for some time.
For a little bit, and I think he dropped off because his name isn't on the final product.
No, he dropped off, but Bradley Cooper came on.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was Scorsese that helped Phillips get all this together, though.
I wouldn't be surprised because it probably also directed where the script should go, bringing in influences like that. And then I think after he left, there was a change in Warner Brothers where like all of the studio heads who were responsible for WB programming changed because it also went through that time frame of like Wonder Woman worked, Justice League doesn't work, we're not sure what to do, repitch this movie to us. And he did repitch it, and then Warner Brothers got scared, reduced the budget, and he's like, that's fine. Instead of casting any other big name actors, I'm going to get a bunch of character actors who will do a fantastic job, which by the way, The casting in this movie I thought was excellent. I thought, like,
Yeah.
obviously Joaquin Phoenix, but all of the pieces around him, none of they were all people I recognized, but I wouldn't be able to tell you who they were. And I love
like Frances
that.
Conroy does a really good job as the mom.
She does a great job in the 3 scenes she's in. She makes such an impression for not really being in the movie that much.
Yeah, she does great. I mean, Robert De Niro, he's Robert De Niro.
He's Robert De Niro, but he plays against type. Like, you don't normally see him in this role, and he does a great job of, like... Actually, I love that talk show, because it made me think of the conversations we had about how you hate talk shows, and how this is kind of indicative of this, but also a spin on it, where, like, you know, it's like, I love you, and he's like, who said that? Oh, come down here. Obviously, it's a delusion, but come down here. Let's put on a great show, you know? But then when he comes to him in the green room, and he's like, hey, so can you go on? And the producer next to him's like, this is a bad idea. You know, we shouldn't do this. This is a horrible idea. You know, it's scripted. It bypasses the whole, like, all the questions are scripted and given to the people in advance to answer. But I thought about you when I was watching the talk show segment. I was like, well, this is you know. But he's great in it.
Brian Tyree Henry, who's like the clerk.
Yeah.
At Arkham. He's always he always has these really tiny parts in movies, but he's always really good.
As a person who's done filing clerk work myself, I took that as, like, especially memorable moment where he's just like, look, man, I'm just a filing clerk here.
Well, it's funny because he appears in, like, one scene of If Beale Street Could Talk, and it's a pretty long scene he's in, but it's only one. But when he's in it, he just chews up the entire screen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, his performance and everything that he does is so good. Like, you forget that there are other people in the room with him. So yeah, I'm glad he got, like, a little moment in the movie.
The 2 detectives, the guy who plays as Thomas Wayne.
The 2 detectives who are, like, straight out of Boardwalk Empire, I feel like.
Who, like, lazy script writing. They know where Arthur Fleck is going to be. If they know anything about him, they'll know that he's going to be on that talk show. Why don't they just wait till he's there? Oh, that's right. Script convenience. Like, that drove me nuts. I was like, well, they know where he's going to be. Why don't they just have him there? The guy who played as Randall, or I think that's his name, the guy who gets stabbed with scissors in his house and gave him the gun. He's another guy. I'm like, I know I've seen him in something, but he does a great job too. Like, it's filled with he's in Zazie Beetz. I don't know what else she's in, but, like, and she wasn't given a lot to do, but I thought
her character should have just been cut from the movie. She added
nothing to it, but
subplot added nothing, and it was distracting more than anything else.
I would agree with that, especially, like, when she's because you really don't need... the movie's 2 hours, so you cut her scenes, you're looking at about an hour and 50 minutes. And I guess the main purpose of her was to, like, solidify the fact that he was delusional, which, again...
Yeah, it's trying to sell him as being crazy, but he doesn't... Again, it doesn't work because this movie doesn't understand what mental illness is, how mental illness works. Right. What crazy people are actually like.
So, and even in that scene, like, let's just to get technical, in that moment where he's like, where he realizes that she was never really there. In that scene, like, they tried to ape what they did in Fight Club, but they have, in order to sell it correctly, what they needed to do was have the shot of him and her, and then repeat the shot at the same angle of him and her, and then go to the next shot, have it of him and her, and then repeat the exact same shot, just him.
Unfortunately, that works too well. That was another. That was a bad directorial choice.
Well, but the way that he did it was he would have a shot of him and her, and then he'd cut to, like, a
separate shot.
That was
of just
like,
him.
and I was like, that I hate that. Like, they should have done, like, a person walking across as a wipe or something. Like, this is filmmaking 101 type stuff. Right?
Yeah, it's very basic and hard to screw up.
So it's baffling because there are other things that seem so well. Like, I love the camera work in the movie. Like, pretty much universally, I love the camera work. I even like we talked about representation. We even have what's the right?
The little guy.
The little guy in there. And, like, hey, he doesn't get killed. But then at the same time, they have a joke about his height. Oh, I'm sorry, no. Every single joke is about his height. So
hey, I thought the moment where he can't unlock the door and he's just terrified, I I laughed pretty hard.
I laughed, dude.
I thought that was really
I was like the only person laughing in the theater through the movie.
It was really funny.
I thought that was great. Like, it was like a nice subtle moment of comedy. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna kill you. Like, yeah, but if I'm that guy...
I mean, that was a very like Bong Joon-ho-y moment where it's like you have something really intense and then have like a slapsticky joke just thrown in there.
Man.
Or the reverse.
See, it's things like that where I'm like, oh, they nailed it. That is a very strong directorial thing. But then it's, then there's a handful of other things that just, this movie.
It's such a mixed bag. And it's unfortunate that no one seems to want to talk about it on like a filmmaking level or an artistic level. Everyone wants to make it political. And it's like, art is about, this is cliched because it's true. Art is about, the human condition. It's about what does it mean to be a person and how are we supposed to live in a world that's as strange and confusing as the one we live in. And, if people just try to make it all about politics, the people who do try to just pervert everything into some political agenda are a bunch of knuckle-dragging mouth breathers.
And again, it's... like you said, when we were like in the ramp up to getting this one going, it's like, this is the least controversial movie that's gaining untold amount of controversy that there is. I mean, like, I do have some friends who are like, oh, this is a great representation of what people who are mentally ill have to go through. And I think
it's not.
Well, wait, hold on. I think if that's something that you're able to get out of it, then good for you. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're saying that this is the definitive
I'll concede
statement,
that. You're right about that.
If you're saying that this is the definitive statement of the state of mental health care in America and the world, or this is a rallying cry for all of the people who feel repressed and undeserving, this is a rallying cry for you, then I have a problem with a broad statement like that. And you can tell it's a mark of poor filmmaking, I'll say, because they're not critical of their main character. They're not fully embracing it, which is something that, like, when we talk about, like, Todd, just to use Old School as an example, Old School is very not critical about any of the decisions that go into Luke Wilson's character throughout the entire movie. It does not actually reflect on like any bad choices he makes, sleeping with a 17-year-old, starting up a fraternity. He still gets the girl in the end. There are no ramifications for statutory rape. Like the campus still gets to go on as it sees fit. The thing that elevates movies made by someone like Scorsese or old Coppola or Sidney Lumet are they're critical of their main characters. And if this movie was critical of the effect, if this movie was more critical of Arthur Fleck, then I think it would have been, one, we would have gotten a stance one way or the other of how Todd Phillips actually feels, but we would have also gotten a deeper experience out of it. After the movie, I really enjoyed watching the movie, but I don't know if I'm going to enjoy looking back on the movie. And I think that's like, as time has gone on.
It's a movie that I think will be forgotten fairly quickly.
We'll see. I don't know if it'll be forgotten, but I definitely... because I think that they're going to use this as a jumping off point for, how can we get Joaquin Phoenix to mix into... I think a sequel is coming. Somehow, some way.
That doesn't make any sense because I can't imagine Batman facing off against a Joker who's a moron.
Who you mean you can't imagine Batman facing off against a 12-year-old in
it doesn't make sense. Because what makes the Joker such an interesting villain for Batman is that he's just as smart as Batman and always one step ahead. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have a Joker who's a total dummy, like in this, it's an interesting character study because you don't see many movies that are about stupid people.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of movies about people who are really smart
and
mentally ill, but you never see movies about people who are dumb and mentally ill, which is, I think... No, I mean that in a good way. I think that's like that's a story that should be told. Like, there are people who are idiots, but they're still people, and they still have inner lives that are interesting and worth looking into.
That's true, because it gave me a look at and that's approaching this movie. I like that aspect of it. Like, this is a character who I could easily see existing in real life in the sense of someone who's out of touch with society, who's trying hard to get a job and make a living for themselves, but is having a hard time doing it, who has been abused and is dependent on the stability of taking care of his mother, that sort of thing. Like, I can, to Joaquin Phoenix's credit, and I'll even say to Todd Phillips's credit, he makes an incredibly believable character in an incredibly believable area.
Yes. Well, a pretty believable character. Like I said, I still have some issues with how his inner psychology is handled and how kind of muddy it is. But like I said, Joaquin Phoenix just sells the package so well. You can kind of gloss over the many inconsistencies inside of it. And I'll say this as kind of to cap it off. I mean, I think if there's one takeaway from the movie, it's that every person, even the person who's at the absolute rock bottom of the societal ladder, like Arthur Fleck or any of the other kind of side characters in this movie who get mistreated, like, they're all people deserving of dignity and respect and compassion, and we should treat everyone that way. Yeah. What I don't think is the good takeaway is that this is somehow like a
rallying cry for...
It's not a affirmation of your victimhood if you're one of those people who loves to play victim. And it's definitely not it's not a right-wing propaganda piece the way all the SJWs want to portray it.
I agree with you. My capstone to this is Joaquin Phoenix really likes giving old ladies baths. He really likes giving old ladies baths. That's... So yeah, Joker, fun movie. Have a good time watching it. It's not going to make you depressed at all or give you deep thoughts.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's
definitely worth watching, I think.
I mean, you can definitely wait until it's on demand or something.
Yeah.
But it's worth seeing, especially if it's good for all the water cooler talk, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good for making arguments at Thanksgiving this year. It's going to be the divider. Did you see that Joker movie? Oh, that Joaquin Phoenix was great, but the movie was saying something awfully bad. Like, all right, Grandpa, I don't need to know how you don't like the movie. That's not what the 70s looked like at all. Like, all right,
well, it takes place in the 80s.
That's right. So. It takes place in 1981, I guess. Ugh.
Yeah, who knows?
So let's talk about Ad Astra.
A real work of art.
Yes. Well, you actually turned me around on The Lost City of Zed, because I was not...
Really?
I enjoyed it, but I was like, oh, this is okay. And then we started talking about Lost City of Zed, and then I listened to James Gray talk about filming Lost City of Zed, and it was... what he had to go through to film it was both... like, listening to him talk about it was hilarious and insane. And I can only imagine that filming Ad Astra might have been more difficult. Yeah, I was going to say harder, but because of all of the zero-G stuff. But it was probably a lot easier because he was in a studio and not in the jungle with film cameras and eating spaghetti and the same thing over and over. Well,
he also had a lot of support for Ad Astra, whereas Lost City of Z, I think, it was really just Brad Pitt throwing his weight behind it on the production side to get it done.
Really?
Well, yeah, from what I understand is he made a movie with Joaquin Phoenix. It was like a romance.
Two lovers.
And it was distributed by the Weinstein Company, and Harvey Weinstein, being the giant
piece of
pig-like human turd that he is, he wanted the ending changed, and James Gray said no. So Weinstein buried the movie. And then he buried the movie. That set James Gray's career back a bit. He came out with The Immigrant, which was hailed as like this masterpiece, but no one saw it because of the whole Weinstein thing. But one of the people who saw The Immigrant was Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt really liked it and said, hey, this is my understanding of the story. He really liked The Immigrant and said, look, I really like your stuff. I know you're kind of down on your luck. If you have another project, let me know and I'll help you get it made. I'll help you get it funded. So he came to him with Lost City of Z. Brad Pitt really liked it. So he, helped get it out there. And then he liked the final product so much that he said, all right, James Gray, the next movie you make, I want to be in it.
I thought he was going to be in Lost City of Z originally.
I don't know. I didn't know that part of it.
Okay.
But yeah, this is just my understanding of the background.
Gotcha.
I could be wrong. But yeah, Brad Pitt is a huge influence on just James Gray being able to get his movies out there. And like I've seen a couple of his earlier ones. Like I saw We Own the Night a long time. I saw We Own the Night when it came out. So I was like a child. But
once again, Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, he's great. And, I liked it, but I think Lost City of Z and Ad Astra they're a huge step forward for him. I mean, they're both great, great movies. I think Lost City of Z is a little better, but Ad Astra is an excellent movie as well. Because, the movies that really stand out to me are the ones whose ideas are woven into their construction. And, I guess for anyone who does not know what this movie is, Brad Pitt is a hotshot astronaut who has no connection to anyone. He has no emotional connection to anybody. He has no real relationships. And he was abandoned by his father, who was an even bigger hotshot astronaut. And Brad Pitt has to journey to the end of the solar system to stop a series of electrical surges and possibly find his dad, who may or may not actually be out there. But, the movie is about the loneliness and isolation that comes with chasing really ambitious, outsized dreams. It's the loneliness that comes with the American dream. Like, if you chase it and follow it through to its end, you will likely end up all by yourself. At least that's what the movie's about to me. And the movie's so good at weaving that idea into its shot framing and its editing and everything, because it's like you watch long sequences and you just feel lonely. You feel isolated in this world.
Agreed.
Brad Pitt is always cut off, framed by himself. You're looking at him through pieces of glass or like his reflection. Everyone's always obscured. And then when he's with other people, they're always set apart from him by some sort of barrier, or again, through glass, through some sort of hazy reflection, or just he's in focus and everyone else is out of focus. You know what I mean? Like little touches like that go so far in service of kind of delivering on that point.
Oh my God, you make me want to rewatch the movie just to see it, because like all of that stuff is like that's the mark of good direction. But anyway, sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
Oh, no. I was gonna open it up for you to deliver your comments.
I think you summarized it better than I did. I think quickly, ratings out of the way. What do you rate this? I think I know what you rate it.
Shiny and chrome.
Yeah, I figured that was
a shiny and chrome.
I think for me, it's a high witness for me. I think it made me really want to rewatch Apocalypse Now in all the best ways. But like I guess my main issue with the movie is I think it's more indicative of the source material when I was watching it, but it feels like at the end of the movie they have that final moment in the last act, and then the resolution to get it the rest of the way to the conclusion of the movie feels like it takes longer than it needs. It feels like it takes a long time, not longer than it needs to, because they go through all the minutia, but it feels like it takes a long time. And because it's a movie all about the isolation of someone, it can make the movie feel very cold. And then as a personal note, I was hoping there'd be more Liv Tyler in there, and there wasn't, which I was sad about. But you have to cut somewhere, and the rest of the story makes more sense than just, having one person in there.
You're not the first person I've heard complain that they wish there was more of a particular actor in it.
Yeah.
But, in a movie that's about how one character is alone.
Right. Well, that'd be different than saying, like, man, I wish there was more Tommy Lee Jones in there, like.
Well, but it's like, I think instinctually, it would be cool to have more Donald Sutherland. It would be cool to have more Ruth Negga. It would be cool to have more Tommy Lee Jones. It'd be cool to have more Liv Tyler, but it just doesn't work.
Right, and that's why
what the movie's about.
That's why for me it's like, a personal thing. I agree with you that as a movie that is all about isolation, and as you said about the pursuit of something to the ultimate degree, coming to your ultimate goal, if you always have more ambition, ultimately you will be alone. I think to what you said, because I didn't even think about that, but that is what the movie is all about, because you have two characters who encapsulate the two ends of continuing to pursue or stopping, and that's represented in our main character and Tommy Lee and his father. And so then you have all the father themes. It's like a Steven Spielberg film, but made by a mature filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly. Because, Tommy Lee Jones, his whole thing is he wants to find proof of extraterrestrial life, and he will do it at all costs. Like, he abandons his family to chase the dream. He convinces other people to abandon their families to chase the dream, and he eventually murders all of them once they get in the way of his dream. And Brad Pitt, to that same degree, he isolates himself from his, wife or girlfriend, and from his mom, and from, everyone who kind of looks out for him, because he's trying to chase his dad. He's trying to, he's trying to live up to the legacy
of his
that
father.
he believes he was given.
And then that cold water moment when he finally does hit that point and he sees what it would ultimately cost him to get to that point.
Like his dad is just senile at that point.
He's senile, can barely see. If he got into Earth's atmosphere, he'd instantly die because he's used to Neptune's gravitational pull. Like all of this, I was like, oh, that's incredible there. I thought that it was funny that they hadn't figured out how to get some sort of centralized gravitational unit on any of these spacecrafts, even though they have Virgin Atlantic doing daily space travel flights to the moon. I was like, I guess I liked it as a touch of like, oh, well, clearly here's where the world priorities lie. We'd much rather get people to the moon and have them jumping around than actually get like a gravitational generator on plane for interstellar travel.
Well, what's interesting is from that perspective, I saw a lot of complaints about how the movie's like not scientifically accurate.
Because they all move in slow motion in space?
I don't know what the complaints are, but it's one of those things, like, it's easy. I like to contrast it with Interstellar on this issue because, Ad Astra never pretends to be scientifically accurate. It never explains any science to you, and it never draws attention to any science. It just is. Like, the world is what it is, and you can take it or leave it. Whereas Interstellar is constantly explaining to you this is how this scientific principle works. So that when Interstellar deviates from it and goes into fantasy land, it's really jarring. But Ad Astra, like, for example, the ending where he kind of rides that explosion on a door.
Yes. Oh my God. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Neptune's rings.
Yeah.
Like, that's really far-fetched and probably, bullshit. But I didn't care. There's no reason to care about it because the movie never pretended that it was scientifically accurate up until that point. You know what I mean? So people who are bitching about it, they're anal retentive.
My argument to that would be that it takes more of the 2001 approach to scientific accuracy, where 2001 Kubrick was trying to be so scientific in his production design that he did not feel like he needed to explain anything, because to explain something to the audience would reveal the artifice of the movie. So in the society that they live in, in the society that they live in, they wouldn't need people to constantly reiterate how the moon works or how zero gravity works or all of this stuff. So I think that it still strove to be as scientifically accurate as possible, but it's fun, I think, for a lot of directors to take some creative license. And the hard part is it's hard to find when you're a director if you're pushing it too far. Like, to me, flying through the air or flying through space after being like warped up into those G's and just having the plating as shield as you're going into these meteors, dead. He would be dead. But it suspends disbelief just enough for just enough people. And you've already suspended your disbelief just enough for the movie that you will buy this concession.
Well, exactly. It never draws attention to the scientific accuracy or inaccuracy of anything. It obeys its own rules, which is what matters.
Because how much food did Tommy Lee Jones have there? And how long did it last if he's been there for like 40 years? 15 years? Yeah. Oh my God.
Or something. I don't know.
That's it. The food thing is usually what gets me. I'm like, has he really been eating the same 8 meals every day for 15 years? No wonder he's insane.
Yeah, it's just everything in it is, even if it's not possible, it's superficially plausible. And that's what counts. I think if you get too tied up in that, you may be focusing on the wrong things. Either that or the rest of the movie just didn't do it for you, so that's what you pick on.
Right. I will say that to that end, like, the production design is fantastic, and the fact that it's basically Heart of Darkness but set in space, similar to how Interstellar is kind of like Heart of Darkness set in space, but Ad Astra goes the extra mile in the isolation of putting you in the most isolated area ever by putting you in space, where the only thing keeping you from oblivion is just a protective coating around your body. Like, very clever on that. And I did like the space monkeys. I did like the blasters.
I liked that. Yeah.
I liked the blasters. I'm actually curious because even though you've said like, oh, they didn't bother explaining the science, I know that there's someone on set, like a production designer or a scientific coordinator writer who will be able to explain exactly how those guns work, and I want to know exactly how they work. Because
I'm the opposite of you. I don't care. I just like that they're there.
As like a trivia thing, like if they're like, oh yeah, it's like a magnetic railgun type system, or like a photon prioritized energy system thing. Like I'm like, okay, as we get more sophisticated in movies and as we are able to explain these things better and better, because we have more and more people who grew up on Star Wars and wanted to understand how these came to be, I would love to hear how how they explain how these things work. Not to poke holes into it, but because I love all of the research that these people do into it.
Well, no, I was saying that's kind of hilarious because you said grew up on Star Wars. With Star Wars, magic crystals is the explanation for almost everything.
If they even explain it, like blaster fire, we don't know how it works. It just does. It operates off of a battery.
Why is there sound in space in Star Wars, but not here? I don't know.
How do twin ion engines work when the whole, Star Wars science is completely different than real world science. And I've accepted that.
Star Wars science is magic. That's the thing. It's a fantasy. It's got wizards and knights and princesses.
And a giant electrical field that binds everything together. But you still can't wear a bra in space.
And also there's gravity in space.
Yes, clearly.
There's always gravity in space.
Oh man, Star Wars.
But yeah, there's so much good stuff to say about Ad Astra. I mean, I think like the final scene with Tommy Lee Jones is just about perfect because it's like everything you want from that scene, and nothing ever feels wrong about it,
Yeah.
It feels like it's handled in the perfect way. I think, kind of the ending where he's like, you have to let go. Like he can't let go of his dreams,
but he's trying to save his
ambitions
son.
But he's telling his son, it's like, I can't let go, but you can. Yeah. So just do it. Like that's a pretty obvious thing to happen in a story like this, but it works really well. I kind of like the episodic nature of it, where it's just we're on the moon for like this kind of self-contained thing, and then we're on Mars for this kind of self-contained thing, and then we're in transit for these self-contained pieces. But they, even though each of them are somewhat self-contained, they contribute to the whole in a very nice way.
Yeah, and episodic storytelling gets beaten up a lot in movies if it's not handled well. I would make the argument in Ad Astra, it doesn't feel like it labors any points, because the movie's 2 hours, I think, like a straight 2 hours.
It's a little over 2 hours.
Just a tad over 2 hours. So you can kind of get away. It's kind of the complaint a lot of people had with Harry Potter 6. How I think Harry Potter 6 moves at an incredibly fast rate, but people are like, it's episodic. But I think like the advantage of, I agree with you. I do like the episodic nature of Ad Astra. It again made me think a lot of Apocalypse Now and Heart of Darkness, which
that's one of the things I didn't appreciate about the movie is how hard they seem to sell the Apocalypse Now connection or inspiration, because it's like you can be inspired by it. That's fine. It's the best movie ever made. So, I don't blame you for being inspired by it, but you don't need to draw that many parallels.
Well, I mean, it's not like they named
that many obvious parallels.
Well, it's not like they named, Tommy Lee Jones' character, oh yeah, he's Colonel Kurtz. What? Like, at least they didn't do that. And it's the structure of Heart of Darkness and of Apocalypse Now on a foundational level is always, I think, going to be really interesting, because it's about, a great war hero or a highly decorated soldier, commander who goes off on a mission. He's the best one to go, and he seems incorruptible, and yet he's the first one to be corrupted. And we're going to send in and see exactly the process that went into turning him into what he was. And in Ad Astra, it was something that was always ingrained in his system. And again, it's just a good structure as well to kind of pull people along. I think that it kind of ran into some problems with some of the stuff. Like, I don't think they would have had the space monkeys with the sort of, I'm not 100% sure what that's in reference to, because it's been a while since I've read Heart of Darkness. Like,
well, I don't think that's necessarily in reference to anything.
It's just something that they wanted to have in there. Or more importantly, to get the captain of the ship that he's on. Okay, as an aside, I know this is a really direct turn. What was the point of Brad Pitt covering for the one pilot who didn't know how to dock the ship to then ultimately not really lead to anything? They made he's like, I won't tell anyone. And it's like, it almost seemed like you owe me one. But then when he goes back in to like hijack the ship to get it to Neptune to launch the atom bomb, all of a sudden, like, understandably, all of the crew members are trying to kill him, which, that makes sense. But then, like, the captain also tries to kill him. Like, what was the point of setting that up to then ultimately amount to, like, what was the overall point? Because I would think that the point of that was setting up this whole idea of Brad Pitt, like, hey, I saved your life, you owe me one, but then ultimately that never paying off. Like, his one act of goodwill didn't pay off in the long run. The captain proves himself to be a coward. Regardless, he won't change. He'll always be a coward, and he'll always be you know what I mean? Like, what was the ultimate purpose of that moment?
I think this is just my own conjecture, but I think one, again, it's sort of reaffirming Brad Pitt's character as like the hyper competent, perfect astronaut or perfect soldier.
Right. Well, him landing it, yes.
And then I think also it's that it's kind of like, no matter what he does, as long as he is doggedly pursuing this goal of finding his dad, he will always end up isolated from people. Like, he thinks he has these astronauts on his side because he helped them, but as soon as he, goes to great lengths to continue his mission, they turn against him. Like, every effort he takes to complete his mission continues to cut him off from people.
To the point where his mission is classified and he can't tell anyone. Like you said, good filmmaking. See, you make me want to rewatch it, voiceover and all.
Voiceover. Yeah, the weakest part of the movie for me was like the voiceover and then the psych, like the
Blade Runner style,
the captain's log type stuff that he does, or the psych evaluations.
Yeah.
Where he's, again, like, we said with Joker says, Arthur Fleck says the theme of the movie in a single sentence. He doesn't just say it, he yells it, which is even worse.
It's worse, yeah.
Like, Brad Pitt stating to the camera how he feels. It comes off weird. I didn't like that choice too much. Because it's like, we can, again, the filmmaking does such a good job of showing how he really feels. And I guess, maybe there's some irony to be mined from the fact that he's saying, I'm fine in these psych evaluations, like, I'm fine, I'm calm, I'm whatever. And then the filmmaking shows him to not be okay.
Right.
So, there may be some ironic effect that you can get from that juxtaposition, but on a visceral level, I just didn't like the voiceover or the captain's log stuff.
I wonder if the voiceover was something that was put in after the fact or if it was always there.
I don't know.
Like, my stance on voiceover is, ever since I watched a ton of Terrence Malick film, I don't hate voiceover. I think that there are ways to do it well.
His voiceover works because the voiceover isn't describing anything that you can't.
Right.
That you can show.
It's always in juxtaposition, or it's always commenting on the theme. I didn't have as big a problem with Ad Astra's voiceover because, again, tying it back, like I said last week, tying it back to Heart of Darkness, where it was told in first person. It was a way to structure the movie. I also think it's sometimes a challenge for screenwriters who are like, I know that voiceover is sort of seen as the, like, crutch of screenwriting, but I want to see if I can elevate it, kind of like how Scorsese or Terrence Malick will use voiceover. I think that there was a little bit of that going in, but I also wonder if, like you said, there's a lot more producers behind this project, if they watched a cut of the film and they're like, we need to have more voiceover here and here. Because I think it was probably always ingrained into the story, but I wonder if they had to have more clarifying voiceovers as the movie went.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I didn't think it was horrible because I had read a lot of reviews going into it, and it's like, that's true. Brad Pitt's emotional expression does not change through the majority of the film. He plays everything very subtly, but I think the voiceover helps, like you said, juxtapose emotions and timing. Now, again, it also helps to build the world too.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Pitt's performance, I mean, he does a really good job because he's playing a guy who is emotionally stunted. So every reaction he has will, by necessity of his character, be very subtle.
Right.
And I think that's where, James Gray kind of takes over, in that Pitt is there to deliver the emotional beats on a very nuanced level where it's in keeping with his character, and then James Gray can use the filmmaking process to illustrate that in a more obvious way.
Right. And to be clear, I think Brad Pitt does a fantastic job. Like, he's got
he's great.
He's got two solid performances this year. He's got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I thought he was really good in, and he's got this. So he's back on track, man.
I know. Good for him.
Yeah. Good for him, except that I don't think this movie made a lot of money.
It didn't. It's the obligatory space movie that no one watched.
Yeah.
Just like there's, I think, every
First
year
Man.
there's an obligatory, First Man was last year's. I think every year there's an obligatory space movie that's good that no one sees. Although I haven't seen First Man, so I'm part of that.
I'm part of that too. I didn't see First Man either.
And there's also like an obligatory, really, really, really good art house horror movie that everyone sees but no one likes. It's like, and that would be like The Witch, Hereditary.
You mean like
It Follows.
You mean the populace doesn't like, because
Yes, that's what I mean when I say no one likes. Like it does really well at the box office because lots of people go see it, but general audiences don't like it. And I think there's a weird thing where I think a lot of people who see horror movies don't actually like horror movies, which is why their reactions are so hostile. Because you look at all the horror movies, like if you look at a lot of horror movies on Rotten Tomatoes, right? The critical ratings can be anywhere from 100% to 0, depending on the movie. But the audience ratings are always like 45 to 60%. They're always in that range, no matter what.
Even something like It Chapter 2, which I felt appealed to a broad group of people. Like it isn't really a horror movie. I mean, it's scary, but it's not scary, but it has like those horror checklist elements that you need. But like I mean,
its audience score is 78%, which is high.
Yeah.
It's on the higher end.
But like,
it's like I just think people don't. I think a lot of people who see horror movies don't actually like horror movies, which makes you wonder why they're seeing them. Or they go in expecting one thing, and when they don't get it, they just like, it's bad.
Yeah. Well, I think that happens a lot because I think everyone expects something different from horror movies, because I know a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I love those Saw movies, and then a lot of other people who are like, yeah, Saw's trash. It's just it's too hard, because they're like the Red Letter Media guys, for example. They love the really slow suspense building horror movies where it's like the moments are building and building and building and building, and that's what builds the tension in it, and then it's creepy as opposed to like overtly in your face scary. And I think there's room for both, but I think a lot of Hollywood studios and a lot of people who generally like horror movies these days go and see them for the jump scare, or interpret it as the more jump scares, the overly explicitly creepy in your face visions, the better. Whereas like you have the good directors like James Wan is really good at balancing both the jump scares and the overly and the slow building creepy moments. Like I think that's kind of what people really like out of horror movies, is when you meld them both together. But Hollywood's gotten to the point where all subtlety is taken out of horror movies and they just want bigger, badder, bloodier, gutsier, that sort of thing.
No, definitely. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the bulk of studio horror movies, to connect it to our last podcast about Martin Scorsese and his Marvel comments, the horror movies that do really well at the box office fit that theme park ride model where it's just a roller coaster and you can see the ramps going up. You get the build up, and then you fall down and everyone screams, and then just build up. And you repeat that up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down throughout the whole movie. And that's why, build up, jump scare is such a successful formula these days, where it's like horror movies that are extremely shocking, that are more dramatic, or that do a ton of build up and then don't jump scare, so there's no release, tend to be looked down upon or more strongly disliked by audiences. I remember watching The Witch in theaters. There's a lot of pretty shocking and horrifying moments in that, but a lot of audience members, instead of being scared, well, actually, no, they were scared by it, but they were so scared by it, there was like very uncomfortable laughter anytime something happened. Like there's that scene where the woman is like breastfeeding a crow and getting her tit picked apart.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of that whole payoff is built up with a lot of tension, but when you get the release, there's no release. There's no real jump scare where you can kind of calm down afterwards. It's just this really kind of sickening shot. And the reaction of people in the audience was they laughed, but it wasn't like, haha, this is so funny. It's, my brain is broken and I don't know how to react after.
Well, like, so you saw Midsummer, right? Which is probably the art house horror movie that's not going to go anywhere.
Well, either that or The Lighthouse.
Oh,
although I'm hoping The Lighthouse wins something.
Yeah, like
I mean, I have yet to see it, but I'm sure it'll be amazing.
In Midsummer and even in actually, no, there was that moment near the end in Hereditary that it was just straight up horror movie stuff.
Yeah.
Especially like Toni Collette, like after she burns her husband or whatever, and then she's like chasing after her son, and then it ends on such a downer. Oh my god, dude, Hereditary is so good.
It's so good. I mean, Toni Collette should have won Best Actress.
She should have.
Like, there's no one who was close to her performance that year.
She's so freaking good at that. Just, you talk about being able to parse out emotional changes in a character. Like, she didn't have to put on the guise of being insane. She seemed like an everyday kind of person, just taken to the extreme. That's another thing about like horror movies that I like. There'll be at least one or two things where I'm like, oh, I can't believe they went there, but not necessarily as like, ooh, ghoulish, but like real grounded things. Like in Hereditary, when like she has the peanut allergy and then she's like looking out of the side of the door and like he swerves, I think, right? He swerves and that's when he hits the post and her face just like gets detached from the rest of her body. I was like, I can't believe they went there.
No, Hereditary is a masterpiece.
Hereditary is amazing. But like with Midsummer, I never really felt like it was a horror film. I felt my biggest issue with it was that all of these supposedly smart people kept being really stupid the entire movie, to the point where like the only smart person, like to me, the only smart person survives, which is what's her name, Florence Pugh, I think is the actress's name.
It's like Danny or something.
Yeah, she's like acts the smartest out of all of them. But like, whereas in Hereditary, I never questioned why I was watching the movie. When I was watching Midsummer, I was like, well, this whole thing could have been avoided if she just didn't go, which she could have just not gone early on. And
I mean, my biggest issue, go ahead.
Well, and I think like all of the relationship stuff in Midsummer I liked a lot, which is I think the priority of the director. But all of the horror stuff, it didn't feel like a horror movie to me personally. It felt like a creepy movie, which I think
felt like a creepy drama.
Yeah, a creepy drama, which I think if we include that in horror movie, which I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, but because that's what The Witch is. The Witch is a creepy drama.
But it's like, Witch is intense though.
It is. It's very intense.
It's a very intense movie. And it's much more like brazenly disturbing than
it's like it's a disturbing period drama, but like emphasis on disturbing. There isn't that much that's like too overtly scary in the conventional sense, and the same with Midsummer. There's nothing too conventionally scary, except that I guess my defining difference is that in a decent horror movie, as someone who's not a horror movie expert, in a decent horror movie, things are happening to the people. In Midsummer, the things that are happening, the people are actively pursuing. Like, they don't have to drink the tea, but they drink the tea. He doesn't have to go and look at the book, but he looks at the book. They didn't have to go on this trip, but they did go on the trip. They're initiating what ends up being horrific that happens to them. Sure, the society is horrific, but if you understand how the society works, it's maybe a little less horrific, which is not necessarily where they want to be when they're talking about killing people at 60 years old, but I digress.
Well, so the two kind of thoughts I have are, one, the reason why, I mean, Midsummer's a good movie, but it fell short relative to Hereditary for me, because Hereditary, every single minute detail that seems like a throwaway pays off at the end. Like, everything about the world and the story, every detail contributes to the larger sum of the movie, and it's so airtight in that way, where it's like it doesn't have anything unnecessary, and if you removed anything, it would lose a bit of its magic. With Midsummer, though, there's a lot that kind of just goes nowhere, or there's a lot that just begs a bunch of questions in there. There's a lot of details that don't add up to anything, which I felt was kind of frustrating, given that I was watching it within the context of having seen Hereditary multiple times. And the second point I wanted to make is that, you know, I guess horror is probably the most subjective of all film genres.
Right,
but at least in terms of like, what is horror? What defines a good scary movie? But for me, horror is like when James Wan is creating a jump scare, he has a very intense build-up, and then he has the jump scare, and that releases the tension.
Right.
For me, a horror movie is that buildup. A movie that does that really well and can maintain that for its entire runtime is a really good horror movie.
I agree with you, which is I think is why a lot of people latched on to the first Paranormal Activity, because the first one kind of does that pretty well. Kind of like keeps building and building and building and building. And especially the second half of Hereditary after the girl is dead, and if you focus on just the son and how his build up to become like the new incarnation of the devil or whatever, like that that every single piece, even if it's a jump scare, the jump scare kind of releases the tension, but it builds upon like what the hell is going on, what's happening, or even in The Exorcist, it builds and builds and builds upon itself, even if it doesn't necessarily have as many jump scares. And the jump scares it does have are kind of corny, like her walking down the staircase. It's kind of corny, but so there's the horror that is kind of like they have things that shock and they have things that build up, and I like the build up, release, calm moment that slowly then builds back up. I like riding the tide of the horror movie.
See, I like the movies that are more just wall to wall unease and tension and anxiety and fear, like Hereditary or The Witch, where
it just even in the back of your mind, even when it's a quiet scene, there's still just something unsettling going on.
Yeah, or It Follows is one of the I think it's the best horror movie, at least in my lifetime.
Really?
And it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. I love It Follows. And I think part of why I really like it is that it is unrelenting in the sense that you never feel at ease. There's always, I mean, the underlying ideas that are suggested at are so horrifyingly fucked up that you don't even want to think about them. But as far as just the movie itself, even the quietest, most peaceful moments in it, you feel like the characters are in danger.
I haven't seen It Follows. I did see Under the Silver Lake, which I do want to talk about at some point, but
we can talk about it maybe on like our year-end episode or something.
Yeah, because I think you liked it, correct?
It's my favorite movie of the year so far.
Okay, wow. Okay. Cool. So I think we're going to be in sync in a lot of it then. It's not my favorite movie so far this year because like John Wick 3 came out and I really enjoyed that. Flaws and all. But I haven't seen It Follows, and I was kind of turned off from seeing It Follows because it is divisive. What's the audience score on that one? I don't know if you could pull that up.
It's in that 50 to 60% range.
50 to 60% range.
That.
Half the people think it's like really scary. The other half of people think that it's a very obvious sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah, 66%. So it's right. It's right in that band. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, again, audiences generally don't know what they want from a horror movie.
Right.
Or they all want different things. Or they just don't like horror movies but see them anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, as expected, it's going to have a somewhat
most
mixed
polarizing
rating.
Yeah. I think Sam Raimi said it best, though. When asked why he made Evil Dead as a horror movie, he did it because you can cast unknowns in horror movies and it doesn't make a difference, and because people will go out and see them anyway. They'll go out and see a horror movie. Even if they don't love it, they'll still go out and see it. Science fiction, clearly not the case, because I think I know some people who felt that Ad Astra was just boring, which I could easily see.
Which is a shame, because, I mean, I can't, but... Maybe I'm just not empathizing with them.
It's a possibility. The movie does tend to hold on long shots, which I personally like. You and I both like it when it holds on long shots. And you have to pay attention to it. And you have to be actively engaged in what's going on. And like I think that kind of detracts from it. Also, I hate to say, but it helps knowing the source material for me. It's not always essential, but it helps knowing that it's based off of something, so then I can use that to sort of calibrate where the movie's at, how it's going to get to point B, what point B is, and how that's different than the original source material. And also, I think that just the initial pace of it getting into the mission, like the movie tends to take its time, which some people might really hate. I don't mind it as much. At the end, when he's trying to figure out how to get back, it did seem like it dragged a little bit to me, but that's only because it was going at the same pace to come to the conclusion that the rest of the movie was going at, if that makes sense. So
yeah, I kind of get what you mean.
So like I felt like it was long, but in the actual,
like after the conflict of the movie is resolved, he does take a while to get home.
Right, or it seems like it takes a while. In actuality, it probably doesn't take that long. And upon a separate, like if I watched it again, I'd be like, oh, it doesn't take that long. But it seems like everything's resolved, and an easy answer to the movie would be, okay, well, he should just stay in isolation. But if that's the case, then clearly the main conflict of the movie wasn't resolved. We just thought it was resolved. And the main conflict of the movie is, what is he he going to do next? Is he going to fulfill his
Yeah.
dad's dream, or is he going to honor what his dad said, or is he going to go back? So in that sense, and again, it's a great scene with him propel.
Yeah.
Like, I love that he uses the gravity of the rotation of it to propel himself forward in a way that
Exactly.
it's so video gamey though. I can get past the science of it, like, oh yeah, if the steel plating, it might not hold up. For him to jump off of the spinning of the rotation so accurately and so close to the actual ship, that's where it suspends disbelief almost a little too far. But I don't think most people notice that. Like, that's something as like,
I mean, who knows?
that's something as like video game players were like, could he really do that in real life? Like, he is the best video game character in the world.
Yes.
But I think
for me, the movie works at its best when it's at its most sort of obviously poetic, where like when he's on Mars and having to send voice messages. Like, I really like those scenes, not just for their content, but how they're constructed. I really like also when he's on Mars, kind of the make happy room. I don't know what they call it in the movie.
Oh yeah. where it's projecting it's just projecting things, and like you can see imperfections in the wallpaper and shit.
I know. And I also really like the bit where, just at the end of the movie, when he finds his dad and they're talking about, kind of the mission to find extraterrestrial life. And his dad is like, it's like, it has to be out there. It has to be out there. I've searched every corner of the galaxy, but I can't find it.
Yeah, and like all of the data is wrong. I need new data. I need different data. We're looking at the wrong data.
And then his son's like, no, you succeeded. Like, if there's nothing out there, then hey, now we know. Now we know we're all we've got. And like that, when it comes to stating your theme at the end of the movie, like, that is the huge difference maker between Ad Astra and Joker. It's like Joker states its theme at the end of the movie in a very kind of heavy-handed and dumb way. Whereas Ad Astra states the theme of the movie at the end in a very like subtle and very fitting and very poetic and beautiful way, I think.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, I mean, both movies are kind of about the same thing. We're all we've got, so time to start acting like it.
I was gonna say, so be compassionate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think one of the problems with the marketing of Ad Astra was people were expecting it to be more of like an action film. I think that's the biggest problem that people have with it. I was not. If you told me an action film was called Ad Astra, I would be like, yeah, bullshit.
What?
Like,
there's no way an action movie has that title.
Exactly. So not that the action scenes weren't handled well, but it is a very, it's fine. The movie itself though, I mean, I guess I like it because it feels artsy fartsy. It feels very meditative.
Yeah.
And I like all of the supporting characters. Again, excellent casting of a higher caliber, but excellent casting in this one as well.
It really pisses me off. One, like, a lot of movies are advertised by studios as being action movies where they'll take the one or two kind of tense action-y sequences and just stuff the trailer with those and nothing else. And then I also get pissed off when they do that and then people go to see the movie and they hate it because it's not what they expected.
Yeah.
It's like you're given the best burger in the world, but you're pissed and you hate it because it's not a bowl of chicken and rice. It's like that attitude makes no fucking sense to me. It's like you're given something really good just because it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. It's bad. Like, I don't know. I just find that baffling.
Again, the studio's trying to get least common denominator into the theater, and they're trying to recoup as much money as they possibly can in 3 days. So what they do is they try and make a broad assumption of who might be going into the movie, advertise it to them in the most primal way possible, and hope to trick people to go into the theater. Because that's what happened.
Yeah, but that's like...
It's bad faith.
Happened with Drive.
It certainly happened with Drive. But if you were given Drive to advertise, how would you advertise it?
I would make the trailer as baffling as possible. Because, okay, here's the counter to the pretend it's an action movie version of creating a trailer.
Right.
The trailers for The Lighthouse make no sense whatsoever. I know, like, watching those trailers, I know less about the movie now than before I watched them.
Yeah, but I will also say it's also an A24 movie, and A24, they make the best trailers. Because they're...
A24?
Yeah, A24.
A24?
A24?
Yeah.
A24. That's what I'm gonna... I've never been...
That's another Matt-ism. That's like how you butcher every Japanese name.
Yep. I do what I can. A24, but A24 takes so much longer to say than A24.
Okay.
A24 but the trailers they make and the movies that they have, like Drive would have been perfect under their banner. But
yeah, but that's the thing. I would have done it like an A24 trailer where you really don't know what's going on. Like you just get a couple of the very basic details, but the trailer is all mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for Drive that would work. For Ad Astra, I think that would work a lot. I feel like they almost tried to do that with the Ad Astra trailer, but it also, like science fiction movies, like high concept science fiction movies are just not something people are interested in anymore. And I think even like, because you greenlight a movie a couple of years before it comes out, like a year and a half or 2 years before it comes out. And then like you look at First Man, and First Man didn't do any numbers, and that was based off of something. And then, I don't know, it felt like they tried to do something. Because I remember coming out of the trailer for Ad Astra, I was like, I have no idea what this is about. It's the Brad Pitt astronaut movie, but I still really wanted to see it. And after the reviews came, that's the other thing is like, if the reviews come out and they're like, oh, this is very different than it was advertised, like Suburbicon. The trailer for Suburbicon is nothing like the movie that came out. And that was that's the only time that I felt completely betrayed by a trailer. Because if I asked you, what did you think Suburbicon was about? What would you say? It's been a while since you watched the trailer, so. Like,
it's like a Fargo style, like Coen Brothers-y, like violent crime farce.
It's kind of. But so there's two storylines going on. One is about a black family that moves into an all-white neighborhood and how the people react.
That's not even in the trailer.
It's not in the trailer at all. That's what part of the movie's about. The other part of the movie is that Matt Damon is conspiring with Julianne Moore to kill another Julianne Moore to collect the insurance money on Julianne Moore. Because Julianne Moore has a twin sister, and he's having an affair with the twin sister. And there are a bunch of people who want in on the insurance money. And that's what the movie's about, and it is not good. The movie is very not good. But that's the only movie that I've seen where the trailer completely hid what the actual movie was about in almost an offensive way at how different it was.
Really?
So, like, I don't see it happen too often. I heard that downsizing was also, the trailer kind of misinterpreted what the movie was going to be about. That's pretty much all I have to say. You have anything else for this episode?
Not really. No.
All right. Well, if you guys are listening, feel free to send us messages, topics you want us to talk about, things you want to see at underthewheelspodcast@gmail.com. And as always, subscribe on iTunes when it becomes available. Give us good ratings. Don't give us bad ratings, please. If you want to give us a bad rating, just don't rate us at all. You're allowed to leave comments, but we probably won't read them because your criticism means nothing to us. This is a textbook example of how to alienate your audience, right? That's what we want to do, right? We want to alienate our audience.
But yeah. If you guys have suggestions, what you like, what you don't like, happy to hear them. You want to start a flame war? I'm happy to engage.
I'll stand by the sidelines and watch. I'd really enjoy that, actually. That'll be fun for me. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not online enough to do that.
There's a reason we don't have a Twitter or an Instagram. Like, no, come on. Yeah. We're bare bones. We're old school. We're iTunes. You can find us. You can also find us at underthewheels.wixsite.com.
Yeah. Or /blog. If you just do .com, it won't work.
Oh.
Because we're inept. Well, because online shit.
What is it? Hold on, I'll pull it up quick. Under the Wheel.
We have a Facebook page that has links, so if all else fails, you can try that.
Yep, underthewheels.wixsite.com/blog. Facebook, Under the Wheels. Yeah. Social media is good, I guess. 1984 part 2.
It's good for something.
Is it, though? Is it really? I have nothing else. Do you have anything else to plug?
Nope.
All right. Well, in that case,
watch Ad Astra.
Yes.
Please.
Give it more money, please, so that we get more stuff from James Gray in his sort of good movie-making period. Please.
Oh, and if you live near a theater that's playing Parasite, go see that.
Yes, go see Parasite. Oh, and if you like really bad action movies that kind of harken from the 90s, go watch Gemini Man in 60 or 120 frames a second, because you won't be able to do it often, and it's worth seeing at least once, even if you absolutely hate it. All right, my name is Matthew,
I'm Gabe.
and you've just gone under the wheels.